Assalamu alaikum. This presentation is from Ahsan Academy on general anatomy of bone. In this session, I will try to define skeleton, classify bone, mention the functions of the skeleton as well as bone, coverings of the bone, parts of the growing as well as adult long bone, and nutrition. You can say artery supply of the bone. So what is the skeletal system? We know that in our body there are some osseous and cartilaginous elements, means bones and cartilages. They are connected together by some joints. Some of them are very stiff, don't allow movement, and some allow limited movement, some allow extensive movement. So all these osseous elements, cartilages and the joints together makes the skeletal system. So we are getting bone, cartilage and joints, this together forming the framework of the body, and this is the skeleton. Skeleton may be of two types, endoskeleton and exoskeleton. In human, you will see the bones are there. On the outer surface of the bone, the muscles remains attached. So bone at least accept one muscle on its outer surface. So rest of the surface may be directly under the skin, but it is endoskeleton. But in snail or tortoise, we can see that the outer part of the shell is not having any muscle attachment. All the muscles remain attached to the inner side. This is known as exoskeleton. Skeleton is outside the body. For the study, we separate the bone from the body, and the process of separation of the bone from the body is known as maceration. So after maceration, or through a process of maceration, we get the bones, and we can study the bone individually, and also we can articulate them artificially to make the skeleton. So we can make the whole skeleton by uniting the bone, and it is known as skeleton, human skeleton. Or we can make the skeleton of the part of the body, like this is the skeleton of the hand. So part of the body can be made and also identified as skeleton of that part, like skeleton of the vertebral column, skeleton of the skull head, skeleton of the pelvis, and so on. Human skeleton comprises of axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. You can see the skeleton in the black shade area. The white bright part of the skeleton is known as axial skeleton, and the relatively shaded area is the appendicular skeleton. You see, appendicular skeleton comprises of the skeleton of the upper and the lower limb, along with the girdle that inserts the limb into the trunk. Functions of the bones, in other words, we can say functions of the skeletal includes protection. It offers the protection to the organs lying within the body trunk, like heart is in the central part of the thoracic cavity, and it is protected from any physical injuries. Supports, it transmits the weight, the bones transmit the weight of the part lying above it and transmits the weight to the ground. In this way, it helps in keeping the body in erect position, helping in movement forward or backward. The calcium present in the body are mainly stored in the bones. About 99% of calcium present in the body are stored in the bones. Hemopoietic tissue includes red bone marrow. It produces the blood elements, means blood cells. This is not a solid organ, it is semi-solid, so it should have a container to contain it, and bone is working as the container for the hemopoietic tissue, and this hemopoietic tissue remaining there can perform properly. Locomotion means movement. Because of the presence of the joints, we can walk, we can run, also we can bend our body in different directions. Some special functions we can mention, like the thoracic case is there. This is specially made to perform the respiration. There are some bones with the cavity inside that helps in modulation of the voice. Bone can be classified morphologically, means observing the features, into long bones, short bones, irregular bones, flat bones, pneumatic bones, and sesamoid bones. Let us discuss each of them with examples. So long bone comprises of tubular shaft at the middle and two ends expanded in nature. So it develops each end, and the shaft develops from the separate ossification process. We can give example the typical long bone as femur, tibia, and we can classify another form, that is the miniature long bone. These are the metacarpal and the metatarsal bones present respectively in hand and foot. So these are a bit different. They have shaft, they have ends, but one of the end is continuous with the shaft. Short bone. These are small bones present in the pressure areas and have several surfaces for articulation. Usually there are 6 surfaces. They are in the compressed in nature, and they are under pressure near to the joints. These examples include the carpal bones of the hand and tarsal bones of the foot. Flat bones appears flat, and it comprises of a central core of spongy bone and on either side layers of very thick compact bone. They are named at the outer and inner table. We can mention as an example the bones of the cranial bone. Here I'm showing a parietal bone, and we can see the scapula is also flat. Irregular bones, they are irregular in shape and have several parts, processes, bodies, and so on. They comprises of a layer of compact bone and spongy bone inside. As an example, the best one we can mention is the vertebra. The pneumatic bones, these are the bones that is filled with air-filled sinuses. They are situated around the nasal cavity and oral cavity. As an example, you can mention the frontal bone, maxilla, sphenoidal bone, and ethmoid. Sesamoid bones are special types of bone developed within the tendon of the muscle with some special purpose. They have different structures from the other bones, like they don't have periosteum, means covering of the bone is the tendon part, and it is not have separate coverings. These bones are having very thin cortex, means compact cortex is very thin and mainly comprises of spongy part. As an example, the best one or largest one is the patella, shown in the figure. Histologically, we can classify bone into two types, compact bone and spongy bone. Compact bone is the outer part, which is dense ivory colored, and the spongy part is trabecular, having spaces within like honeycomb. This compact bone comprises of Haversian system, which is under microscope visible, and spongy bone comprises of mirrors. The Haversian system is a definite cylindrical unit that lies within the bone, and this is absent in the spongy bone. If we summarize the layers of a long bone, we can see that outer covering is periosteum. It is not mineralized. It's a membrane like, and it is present all over the bone except the surface that makes the joint. It is known as articular surface. So articular surfaces are covered by cartilage. So deep to the periosteum lies the compact bone, and in the shaft we will find that the compact bone covering or enclosing a cavity, longitudinal cavity, that is known as medullary cavity, and inside the ends we will get the spongy bone. This is an example of showing the different sections of the bone. If we get section, this is a humerus, and if we take section at the ends, we will get compact, then inside spongy and outermost periosteum. If we go down towards the shaft, medullary cavity will appear that increases in size at the middle. Periosteum is the covering of the bones. This is present all over the bone except the articular surfaces, where these surfaces are covered by cartilage known as articular cartilage. This periosteum comprises of 3 layers detectable under microscope histologically. So outer part is fibrous, means content of the collagen fiber is more. Middle layer is vascular, means blood vessels concentration is more. Capillary thin blood vessels, very minute blood vessels making plexus there. And the innermost layer is cellular, means these cells are bone forming cells or the progenitor of bone cell forming cells are there. That's why they perform different function. The fibrous cord protects the bone, the vascular cord is source of the nutrition, and the cellular cord that helps in formation of the bone. This is helping in growth, in diameter, in breadth. That's why we usually define periosteum using these terminologies like it's a fibrovasculocellular covering of the bone. So long bone has 3 parts for adult one. This is the upper end or proximal end. This one is the lower end or distal end, and in between there is shaft. When it is growing in nature, means it is the bone of the child, they are having different parts. These ends are separated from the shaft region by a thin plate of cartilage. This is known as epiphyseal cartilage. Proximal to epiphyseal cartilage is the epiphysis, and the lower part, middle part, that is shaft, and the part of the shaft that is close to the epiphyseal cartilage is known as metaphysis, and the rest of the shaft is called diaphysis. So a long growing bone comprises of a long developing bone comprises of epiphysis, epiphyseal plate of cartilage, metaphysis, then diaphysis. Again it repeats: metaphysis, epiphyseal cartilage, and epiphysis of the other end. When it becomes adult, the epiphyseal cartilage disappears and it is replaced by a thin layer of compact bone. This is known as the epiphyseal line, and when this epiphyseal line is formed, metaphysis fuses with the epiphysis. So it is now known as the upper end or proximal end. Rest of the metaphysis is continuous with the diaphysis, and this is now known as shaft. So in adult we will get proximal and distal ends, and in between shaft. The metaphysis is absorbed in the ends and in the shaft. You can see the X-ray. The X-ray of the left side, it is growing, because you see the epiphyseal plate of cartilages are visible, but on the right side the separation is not visible. A darker line is visible that indicates the compact thin line. To summarize, let me say that this is a growing bone, long bone, so it is having epiphysis, epiphyseal cartilage, then diaphysis. Diaphysis is having metaphyseal end, and same thing repeating on the distal end. So if it is adult, we will get the end, 2 ends, proximal and distal end, in between shaft. You see, in one end there may be more than one epiphysis. So this bone is showing two epiphyses in the proximal end and one epiphysis in the lower end. There are structural differences between epiphysis and the diaphysis. Epiphysis is situated in the end and it is the wider section situated in the ends of the bone, and it comprises of each of the epiphysis comprises of a compact layer of bone and a spongy bone inside. The spongy bone inside contains the red bone marrow. On the contrary, you see the shaft or the diaphysis, the walls are compact. Thin spongy layer may be present inside, and there a wider cavity is present in the shaft region. That cavity contains yellow bone marrow, means it is almost totally fat. So what is epiphysis? Epiphysis is the expanded part situated in the ends who are developed from a separate ossification centers. So these epiphyses may be of four types. Let me discuss one by one. The pressure epiphysis is one. It is situated which part makes the joint. So it always remains under pressure and expands because of this pressure. This, as example, we can say head of the femur, condyle of the femur, condyles of the tibia. It transmits the body weight and also remains under pressure. You see, these are the examples of pressure epiphysis. Traction epiphysis, these are usually non-articular and is not in the line of weight transmission. They are formed because of the pull primarily by the tendon, also by the ligaments. This ossification starts later than the pressure epiphysis. So pressure epiphysis, the ossification starts early, but union with the shaft occurs at the late. Usually the ossification center of traction epiphysis appear later, but it fuses with the shaft early. The examples, you can say the tubercle, trochanter present at the bone. Fibula is the exception. You see, upper end of the fibula is making joint, but it is not in the line of transmission of the weight. There is no pressure epiphysis here, but you can see the muscle inserted here and pulling it. Also ligaments are there. So this epiphysis is formed by the traction type of epiphysis. It is not in the line of weight transmission, but the lower end of the fibula forming the ankle, and it is under pressure. So this is the pressure epiphysis, but they are different in following the rules of ossification. Atavistic epiphysis, these are separate bone in some animals, but in human they are fused with one bone. This is example, I can say, the coracoid process of the scapula, posterior tubercle of the talus. Aberrant. They are different from other members of the group. That means aberrant. This is different, similar bone. This epiphysis of the first metacarpal bone, if you see here in the X-ray, the epiphysis of the metacarpal bone of the thumb is present in the lower part, but the rest of the four having in the upper part, means this end is distal and that is proximal. This is known as aberrant epiphysis. To understand growing end, we must know the law of ossification. Ossification starts at a point known as center. So ossification center for the shaft appears very early in the intrauterine life, during the 3rd month of intrauterine life. So this is known as, these all are called the primary ossification center. At the end, the ossification centers appears just after birth or subsequent period. So these are known as secondary ossification center. So each epiphysis is developed from separate secondary ossification center. In the end, you see the ossification center first appear, unites later with the shaft. So end hence remains separated by the epiphyseal cartilage, continues to grow longitudinally. So whenever it fuses with the shaft, the growth of that end ceases. So this usually appear first, will unite last, with the exception of the fibula. Fibula, the rule is different. So the end which fuses with the diaphysis leg continue to grow for a longer period. That's why it is known as growing end. We can remember one figure that the knee and elbow is coming closer, and you can see the bones coming very close at the lower end of the humerus, upper end of radius as well as ulna, and the lower end of you see femur and upper end of tibia and fibula. These are the growing ends. So these ends fuses late with the shaft. Now how the bone gets its nutrition? Let us start with the growing bone. So growing long bone has epiphysis separated from the metaphysis by plate of cartilage, which is avascular. So epiphysis is having a separate artery, metaphysis is having separate artery, and the diaphysis is also having separate artery. So diaphysis supplied by diaphyseal nutrient artery, metaphysis is supplied by metaphyseal artery, epiphysis is supplied by epiphyseal artery, which all may be multiple. Periosteum covers the bone and it is having a very vascular middle layer that is supplying nutrition to the bone also. These are called periosteal arteries. So a growing long bone has all these four types of artery. Diaphyseal artery usually one in number, but rest may be multiple. Now when the bone become adult, epiphyseal cartilage disappears. This is ossified into a thick plates of bone. So metaphyseal artery now can cross the area as there is no cartilage, and usually it become continuous with the epiphyseal artery or with the nutrient artery of the shaft. So we will not get any metaphyseal artery in adult bone. So I have deleted it. Now in adult bone we don't identify the mid part as diaphysis. It is shaft. So the name diaphysis is erased. So now we have nutrient artery, epiphyseal artery, and periosteal artery. So these three are the arteries of a mature bone. So this is the artery supply. Thanks for remaining with the presentation.